Here in Chapter 9, we're going to begin hypothesis testing. This is probably the most important method in statistics, and it's how we make decisions about whether or not research questions are true. So we're trying to see if the data supports our research hypothesis or not. So to start a hypothesis test, you have to have something called a null hypothesis and an alternative hypothesis. So a hypothesis is just a statement that something is true. And what we want to do is, in this method of hypothesis testing, is try to make a decision between two opposing hypotheses here that are negations of each other. So one of them has to be true. And so if we show that one is not likely or not probable, then the other one will be true. And then our null hypothesis, we'll denote that with an H and a subscripted 0, 0 for null, nothing. This is what we call the status quo hypothesis, or the nothing happens hypothesis, or no difference, no effect. And it's usually stated as a parameter is either equal to, less than equal, or greater than equal to some default or hypothesized value. And then the other hypothesis is called the alternative. So this is the negation hypothesis. And that's denoted H with a subscripted A, also called the research hypothesis. And this alternative or research hypothesis is what we want to show is true. So sometimes you'll start with your research hypothesis or your alternative because that's what you want to show is true. And that's usually stated as a parameter is greater than, less than, or not equal to some value. So the null hypothesis is always the one that includes the equal, either equal, less than equal, or greater than equal. And then what happens is if you reject your null hypothesis, then you're going to accept the alternative hypothesis as being true. So it doesn't prove it true 100%, but we'll have a degree of reliability in there. So let's look at some examples of null and alternative hypotheses. So let's say that our research question is we want to determine if more than 20% of high school students smoke marijuana. So we'll list our two hypotheses here, H0 and HA. We'll start with HA, which is what we want to show or want to determine, which is the proportion or percent is more than 20. So we would state that as P is greater than 0.20. P stands for the population proportion. And if that's not the case, then P will be less than equal to 0.20. Now, some books will use for the null hypothesis P equals 0.20 instead of less than equal. Our textbook chooses to make these exactly opposites of each other. If you're not greater, then you're less than equal. So if nothing happens, if we can't show that the proportion is more, then it'll be less than equal. You collect data about the average number of patients per nurse. You want to determine if it is less than 8. So we want to show or determine that average number, so we're dealing with averages, is less than 8. So we've got H0, HA. HA is what we want to show is true. So this is dealing with averages or means. So we want to show the population mean mu is less than 8. That's what we want to show. If that's not the case, then that population mean is going to be greater than equal 8. So these are, again, are opposites of each other. The poverty rate last year was 14%. A researcher wants to determine if it has changed. So changed is not directional. So H0, HA, we want to show that it's changed. Okay, so this is dealing with percents. So we're going to use P and not mu. So this is going to be P. HA is what we want to show is true. So if it's changed, then that proportion P is not going to be equal to 0.14. If it's changed, that's what we want to show. Now, if this is not the case, if nothing's happened, then this will just be P equals 0.14. So an expression and its opposite. Oh, also up here, again, some books would use mu equals 8. And it doesn't matter to me which one you use, whether you use equal, less than equal, or equal, greater than equal. The null has to have the equal sign involved. And then last example here, a researcher wants to determine if the mean, we're dealing with means, mean fasting glucose level of high school students is over 120, which would indicate diabetes. So H0HA, so HA is what we want to show or determine. We're dealing with means, so this will be mu, and we want to know if it's over 120, so greater than 120. If that is not the case, then the opposite happens, less than equal 120. And again, some books would do equal 120. So that's null and alternative hypothesis. You have to start by determining what you want to show with your test.